Hello, everyone. This is Harold Cruz, and this is Southern Nationalist Radio, and this is episode 61. And this evening we're back with Brad Griffin. Evening, Brad.
Good evening, Harold. Thanks for having me.
Well, I always enjoy talking to you. Well, there's been a lot going on since the last week we spoke. We kind of missed a day because of some things going on with, or a week because of something going on down in Alabama with Dr. Hill he wasn't able to make last week.
Mm-hmm.
So if we need to run over, that's fine.
Yeah, we got a. I mean, it's been a real big week, I would say.
All right. Well, which topic would you like to start on?
Well, let's kind of pick up where we left off last time, and here goes my dog. Last time we were discussing Trump's first year in office, and after that podcast, I was inspired to go out and write a big timeline of everything, that had occurred over his first year. And I sat there and I went through every single thing, major action, that we did, that happened in the mainstream. And I came up and I wrote these articles and I did an analysis of it.
Yeah,
and
those are on Dissent.com.
Yeah, you tell me if you agree with this. But I found four major trends that, has kind of been at work since the election. The first is left-wing violence. There's been a big upsurge in that.
Yep.
The second is social media censorship. As everybody knows, we're about to be getting banned from Purge from Twitter.
Well, and also payment platforms as well. That's not really social media, but payment platforms as well.
Payment platforms, yeah, too. That's a part of it. The third is that, ever since the election, Trump's been pursuing this mainstream conservative agenda. And the fourth is that, over the course of the last year, both, us Southern Nationalists who were never really enthusiastic about Trump in the first place, and the broader alt-right kind of became alienated from what was going on. So those four trends pretty much define the whole first year. What do you think about that?
Yeah, I think so. We've spoken on the first, well, we've probably spoken on all of them on multiple occasions. So I don't know how much detail there is to go over.
Yeah, there's nothing much that, we can. We've discussed this to death a million times before, but it's mainly those four trends. And as we move into Trump's second year, and I will date that from, since the first year podcast, I see those trends continuing, both the conservative agenda, the escalation of censorship, which, we have deadlines coming with Twitter having new policies. And I believe it was YouTube announced they were going to hire 10,000 or so people to censor videos. There hasn't been much violence lately, but that's still out there. And the alt-right still doesn't clearly know what to do in response to it. Hasn't, come up with a unified direction. Like, during the campaign, everyone was united, the alt-right at least, was united around electing Trump and defeating Hillary and defeating the cucks. But, there's just been a drift for this whole year. But anyway, that's old hat. And we've already discussed this to death, but I just wanted to emphasize, I've kind of examined this and, I've seen clear trends. I wanted to emphasize that. But, okay, we got the election of Roy Moore's election coming up, I believe, on Tuesday. We have Michael Flynn pleading guilty that, he lied to the FBI. And we got Kate Steinle's murder. What do you think about that?
Well, those are big events. Of course, we have talked about the Roy Moore on a couple of occasions. Everything's looking good for his election. A couple of the polls that showed Jones being either even, well, mostly they've been showing him being even or within striking distance or more, have been pretty much fake, particularly the Washington Post, where they oversampled Democrats to get that result. Most of the polls show Moore being comfortably ahead, and there seems to be a lot of enthusiasm on the ground in Alabama, from what I understand, for Moore.
Yeah, it's definitely it's definitely picked up over the last 2 weeks. You have what's actually happened is that Moore, doubled down and has pushed forward, and these allegations kind of went away as it's spiraled, and a dozen or so more people have been accused of sexual harassment. Rep John Conyers, who represents Detroit, I think he resigned today. The rumor is that Senator Al Franken is going to resign tomorrow.
Yep, that's the rumor.
Because all the Democrats have called on him to resign, including
and he's had some more. He's had some more accusers come forward as well.
More accusers, yeah. And so, the Roy Moore looks set to win the election, and Trump is having, I think, the big rally tomorrow in Pensacola to support him, and he endorsed Moore.
Yeah, explicitly.
Explicitly, yeah.
Well, before he had not been explicit; he only kind of implied it. So that was good.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that was good. And then of course the McConnell and the RNC and all them have folded just like they did with Trump. So
yeah, well, cucks have got to cuck. That's what
cucks have got to cuck. Okay, well, I think I'm sure next time we talk we'll discuss Roy Moore's victory. But Michael Flynn, that was in the news. The news there was originally that Flynn had colluded or something with the Russian ambassador when Trump was a candidate, but that story ended up being fake news, and it was during the transition when he was asked, I think, to Russia to wait, not to retaliate for sanctions that were imposed by the Obama administration.
Yeah, let me inject here. It was ABC that put out the fake news that it was during the campaign instead of during the transition period. And that news caused a 350-point drop in a few hours of the stock market. They quickly reversed when the error or the fake news became apparent. I'm not willing to concede that it was unintentional. And the reporter who made that announcement, he's been on a suspension for 30 days, I think.
Yeah.
The way it turned out is it was actually Jared Kushner who asked Flynn to intercede with the Russians or to speak with the Russians concerning a favor for Israel about some settlements, if I understand.
You're right, and in January, the House of Representatives condemned the UN over that vote. It was one of the opening gambits of Congress pandering to everything Israel wants to do. But there was more. It was the Flynn story. It was more about collusion with Netanyahu through Kushner through Flynn to. It was really Israel's interference, not so much Russia's.
Yeah, and using Kushner and Flynn as go-betweens.
Yeah. Well, one of the other big things that came up last week is Kate Steinle's murderer got off scot-free out in San Francisco, which was just outrageous. But I mean, you got to think that's the kind of. I mean, from what I understand, that he was in federal custody, and the city of San Francisco said, "Oh, release him," and then he accidentally, they say, shot and killed Kate Steinle on that pier.
Well, he wasn't in federal custody. He was in state custody.
State custody.
And you just spoke there. And ICE requested him to be turned over to ICE because he's here illegally, and they were going to deport him for the 6th time. He'd been previously deported 5 times. And the city, being a sanctuary city, San Francisco that is, did not turn him over. They just let him loose, and he ended up shooting Kate Steinle.
And then a jury decides that he's completely innocent and can walk free.
Yeah.
It just shows you what kind of city that is. I mean, there's a reason why they have the sanctuary city policy in the first place. Is because they're just insane.
Yeah. Well, you're not going to convince me that part of it was not to stick a thumb in Donald Trump's eye. It was intentionally done, the acquittal, that is, despite Donald Trump and all the people who oppose illegal immigration in sanctuary cities.
And I mean, they had issued, I want to say, Trump had issued an executive order about these sanctuary cities, and, it got tied up in federal court. I know a judge recently ruled on it a few months ago. and said they couldn't, enforce what they wanted to do on the sanctuary cities front.
Yeah.
And so, I mean, it's just another example of this was, this huge deal that went on for a year and a half in the campaign, and Kate Steinle was, brought up over and over again, and all for her murderer to walk free. And Congress, the Stonewall of issue, they were going to pass Kate's law, and it passed the House. And the House also passed a bill on sanctuary cities, and it went to the Senate. And in the Senate, it has remained, I believe, since June.
Yeah.
Like 6 months, it's just sat there in, I think, the Judiciary Committee.
Yeah. Well,
both bills, no action on them.
Well, it needs to move now.
Yeah.
Because if it can't be moved out now, it's just dead altogether, and without a significant change of personnel or senators. Get some more good.
Yeah, the Senate hasn't passed the border wall funding.
Nope. They
haven't passed the law that the bill that the House passed on sanctuary cities. They haven't passed Kate's law. There's a number of things there. I mean, that they're just not doing. And before we get into that, what Congress has been doing. We'll briefly dip into some white pills from the Supreme Court. Supreme Court announced that Trump's travel ban could go into full effect. I mean, just the other day that happened.
Yep.
Although the travel ban, as it's changed through 2 or 3 versions, it was temporary, and I understand now it's permanent.
Mm-hmm.
But the new permanent travel ban applies to Iran, North Korea, Chad, Venezuela. That's 4 countries right there who don't produce terrorists. But the good side of it is it applies to, I think, Somalia, Libya, Syria, and Yemen. I think it's those 4. So that's good. So it's kind of it's half of what it was, but it's permanent. Maybe they can expand it now that the precedent's been set. But
well, the biggest thing is that many people erroneously think of it as a Muslim ban, even though, as you said, there are 2 countries on there that aren't Muslim, North Korea and Venezuela. Really is a ban on countries who do not have a systematic way to give documents. Basically, there's no documentation on people coming from those countries, so they can't be vetted as to their criminality or any sort of terrorist affiliation or anything like that. That's really what it's for. And the Supreme Court says that it can be enforced during the time it's still being litigated in the court. It's not the final decision.
It's not the final decision.
No, it's just saying that it can be forced while it's during the process.
That's a key thing. And also, I mean, we'll see what comes of the travel ban, even though at this point it's kind of moved away from being a Muslim ban to like a ban on failed states and America's enemies.
Yeah.
Venezuela, Iran, and North Korea, the 3 that were mentioned in Trump's UN speech.
Yeah.
But the Supreme Court is also dealing with this, isn't it the case about like bakers and gay weddings?
They have said something about that. I'm not quite sure.
That's that's coming down. I know there was oral arguments on that.
Okay. Decision has been made yet.
The word on the street is that Kennedy is going to side with, the Christian bakers, and that's all but a done deal, from what I'm hearing.
Okay.
From
that would be good.
The arguments they've seen. But that's something that might be coming down the road. We need to keep an eye on, and that would be good news, just like the reinstatement, I guess, of the travel ban until the whole court can hear the case. That was good news.
Yeah. Now, of course, as far as the travel ban, I'll just add one last thing. It was a 7-2 decision with Sotomayor and Ginsburg, of course, saying that they would have not allowed the travel ban to be in effect during while it was being litigated, which is no surprise
they're
at all.
hopeless.
Yeah, they need to go. Hopefully, Ginsburg pretty soon, I hope.
Yeah. Now, President Trump, I got this also written down here, has also been doing some, I would call them PC maneuvers lately. He put out a video about Rosa Parks the other day on Twitter, where he was like, the sacrifices of Rosa Parks against the evil segregationists.
Yeah.
And then after the Roy Moore rally, he's going to this Civil Rights Museum in Mississippi, and the NAACP there is condemning him, like, how dare you, come and celebrate civil rights? And I've heard all these people like, how dare you honor Rosa Parks?
Well, I can agree with them on that.
You can't win. I mean, you can't win.
No. Well, I mean, at this point, that's 50 years ago. That battle isn't going to be refought. I'm not going to really hold it against Trump for reopening old wounds. It's not something I would really expect him to do. I don't particularly appreciate it, but it isn't something I'm particularly upset about.
Yeah, I mean, it seems like in all these honorific issues, he's kind of gone along with the flow.
Yeah.
In the timeline I noticed that he celebrated African American History Month, Asian and Pacific Islander Month, Native American Month, Women Month, Hispanic Month, Jewish Month. Everything you can think of. But whites. So he's been celebrating the whole multicultural calendar.
Just to add that to that, he did have a little ceremony in the White House. What was it, last week, for the Wind Talkers, the Navajos, who
that was part of Native American Month, which was November.
Yeah, and he kind of gave a backhanded gave Elizabeth Warren the back of his hand by calling her a Pocahontas. Which he got soundly denounced for in all the media, but he didn't. He's
supposed to sit there and give the politically correct bullshit,
That's right.
For each one of these months.
He did not in that instance, though. And the Navajo veterans who were there didn't seem to offended by it either. So,
well, our friends in Congress have been, really putting the pedal to the metal lately. And more in this last week, in fact, than all year. And there's two things that they have done this week that are going to have major implications. The first is they confirmed that woman, Kirstjen, whatever her name is, Kirstjen Nielsen, as the DHS secretary. They call her Lady DACA on Breitbart because she's a Bush crony who supports amnesty for illegal aliens and has lobbied for it. And and I wrote in the OD, exactly a year. It was exactly a year ago when we were hoping that Chris Kobach was going to get the DHS position, and it went to Kelly, and now it's been gone to her.
Yeah.
Which is
Kobach, as far as I know, is still serving on the election review.
Yeah.
The campaign review, as far as voter fraud, that sort of thing, which is important. But I'd rather have him on as DHS secretary myself.
Yeah, I think he can do a lot. I mean, in terms of getting all the illegals out of here and designing policies where they wouldn't come back. I mean, I can't think of a better person. And it's a shame that job went to some general, and now it's been gone to this Bush flunky, and it's very disappointing. Compared to, I mean, I looked back a year ago and I was actually optimistic that this great guy was going to get this job, and now it's not happened. But moving on from that, obviously the biggest thing that Congress has done all year is tax reform, which passed the Senate, the Great Tax Cut Act of 2017. It's the largest, from what I understand, the largest corporate tax cut we've ever done in American history. It's going to drop the corporate tax rate from, I think, 35% down to 20%.
Yeah.
It's the main reason that the stock market bubble, has been exploding in anticipation of this tax cut. And that's kind of revved up the economy. I think, it's kind of in a bubble right now.
Yeah. Well,
so they're thrilled about that. That's the tax thing. The Tax Cut Act of 2017 is the big accomplishment of the Trump administration in its first year.
Yeah. Now, whether or not this is going to bring back business or industry to the U.S., that remains to be seen. But I think that the real negative point to this is that the individual tax cuts are sunset in. I don't know the year right offhand, but it's not too far out there. It's like 3, maybe 4 years. in which those are
it's like
but the corporate tax cuts are permanent.
You notice the benefit of it immediately, and then it phases out, and then you're left with the massive corporate tax cut. And two other things I noticed that stuck out to me. First, during the campaign, we heard all about, like, you know, the hedge fund guys are going to be so mad at me, and I'm going to get rid of this carried interest loophole, right? Well, that didn't happen. That didn't happen in the final bill. That was one of the big talking points on the campaign trail. And the second thing is that both during the campaign and even up through the first few months of 2017, when Trump first came in office, he was talking to, or he had first been elected, he was doing stuff like the carrier deal, right?
Yeah.
He was calling up these corporations and saying, you got to keep your jobs here. Well, he got so much blowback on that, he quit doing it. And then he said, for a few months there, it's like, well, if Mexico's going to ship these cars across the border, I'm going to have this big border tax. And it's going to be, this big tax, and it's going to, stop that from happening.
Yeah.
Well, there was no border tax at all in tax reform, just a huge corporate tax cut that, all the donors wanted, and, sunsets on, the middle class.
Yeah.
And, that's what the political capital was spent on. I mean, we got to face it. That is, they literally ran, what the Republicans did is they ran on all this stuff, and we'll build this border wall for you. And it's like, no, not border wall, tax cuts.
Yeah.
So.
Well, now, at this point, the House bill, as far as the tax reform, was much better than the Senate bill. The individual tax cuts from the House bill were permanent, and they were also more encouraging of the family formation. But as things happen in the Senate, it comes out much watered down than what comes through the House.
The Senate bill repealed the individual mandate in Obamacare. Did the House bill do that as well? I don't think it did it? I
don't know right offhand.
I believe that's a conflict. That's a conflict in the bill, is that the Senate repealed the individual mandate, but the House didn't. And that's going to have to be reconciled, although there's no way they're going to let that fail,
No.
They have too much writing on that.
I hope not. My big question is whether or not there's going to be a shutdown come December 8th.
Yeah, that's coming up in just a few days.
Yeah. The Democrats are promising it if there is not a clean DACA.
A clean DACA.
In the continuing resolution. But the Republicans say that they're willing to allow the Democrats to shut the government down over DACA.
Yeah, they think that there's just a bluff and it's not going to happen.
Yeah. Well,
they unveiled some kind of bill in the Senate today that is basically a DACA amnesty for work permits, but they link it to, ending sanctuary cities, E-Verify, ending chain migration, legal chain migration.
Yeah.
It seems like to be more of a poison pill thing to, like, well, here's your chance to save DACA, but there's no way you're ever going to sign off on this.
Yeah.
And so we get rid of it and we save face. Now, that would be good if they did that.
Yeah.
But,
I'm not sure how I would feel as far as if they would be willing to make that trade for DACA for those other things, if they were actually in force.
Mm-hmm. If they were serious about, getting rid of chain migration, which would seriously cut out, the annual flow of
the legal migration,
legal immigration, it might be worth it. But the Democrats aren't going to sign off on that.
No.
So, I mean, it's not going to go anywhere. It seems like, to me, like a poison pill.
Yeah. Well,
but that's coming up.
Yeah. Well, we have to wonder if the public is going to see who's the public is going to blame for the government shutdown, whether it's going to be Trump or the Democrats. Who knows?
Well, go ahead.
I was just going to say, who knows who they'll blame. They generally blame the Republicans in the past, but in this case, the Democrats seem to be the one who's initiating it all over DACA, which isn't very which isn't popular. I mean, people don't want illegal immigrants here.
Yeah.
By large margins. So
I personally don't think the Democrats are going to do it, shut the government down. I want to say they want to punt this thing off until they want to pass it's a short-term spending resolution that gets them to like Christmas or the week after Christmas, right?
Okay.
So I mean, they'd have other chances to do this. I don't know if they're willing to go there on that. But anyway, like I said, there's just all this stuff that's been going on this weekend. We ain't even scratched the surface of it. Well, we're about halfway through all the various things. But as I said on OD, we've been through what I'm calling Jewish Week. Number one, the House passed the Taylor Act, which defunds the Palestinian Authority. And then this afternoon, Trump, announced that he was going to recognize Jerusalem as the capital of Israel. And tomorrow is the Hanukkah party for Jewish donors at the White House. So we're doing a lot of things to make the Jews happy this week. We're making Netanyahu happy. We're really making Sheldon Adelson happy. He gave Trump $80 million in the campaign and was furious with Trump for months that the State Department was dragging its heels and was not signing off on this, move the embassy to Jerusalem.
Okay. Well, now there's two things. First, I don't particularly care if the U.S. gives the Palestinian Authority money. I just assume they cut them off and cut Israel off as well.
Yeah, I do. But
I don't have any particular beef with the Palestinians, but they're not our friends either.
I agree.
The same with Israel. Well, I'm probably a little more hostile to Israel since they seem to have a lot more interference and influence.
The fangs are sunk in, and the blood
and that sort of thing as well. But as far as Jerusalem, I don't know if I care. I think it's going to cause more problems than it's going to solve. It's going to cause the U.S. a lot of problems as far as international affairs with various Muslim countries and some European countries. So I'm not sure what we're gaining by it, other than just appeasing the Jewish lobby and Israel. And what do we get for that? Just more heartache, as far as I'm concerned.
Well, that's been, if you look at, the reason I bring this up is, it fits the pattern we've all seen all year. Going back to Flynn and that vote on Israeli settlements, right?
Yeah.
The first thing the House did this year was condemn the UN over those Israeli settlements. But we've also done all kinds of things for Israel over the year. We also withdrew from UNESCO, I think in October, over anti-Israel bias. And then in the big defense spending bill, we're giving Israel $705 million to complete all these missile defense systems. So I guess that's on top of the foreign aid that we usually give them. And
of course, we also went along with them for their support of ISIS as well.
Then of course there was the Iran deal that Trump decertified, because that's another major item on the AIPAC Sheldon Adelson agenda.
Yeah.
The only one thing that Israel didn't. Well, the only one thing that the big Jewish lobby didn't get that it wanted was the major ground war in Syria to throw out Assad. But that was that would have happened unless the only reason that didn't happen is because Russia was active there. Otherwise, we would have gone in.
Yeah. Now, personally, anybody can disagree with me if they want. If there's any Muslim country that we should have good relations with, it would be Iran.
Yeah.
Iran isn't really aggressive. They tend to be protective of Shia minorities in other Muslim countries, which is understandable, but they're pretty
isolationist power.
Yeah.
It's a regional power with regional ambitions, and it's not engaged in international terrorism in Europe or the United States. It's not, Shiite terrorists. We've noticed this before, blowing themselves up in Europe and America. But to see that, and that goes back to the thing I hate the most about the travel ban. The big country on there, the Muslim country on there, is Iran.
Yeah.
But they're the ones of all the countries over there, they're the ones who are not, producing all these terrorists. You check, every terrorist I've seen has been from
Saudi Arabia,
Sudan, Egypt, Algeria, Tunisia,
Somalia,
Pakistan, maybe some of the other stands like Uzbekistan, Kazakhstan.
A few from the Gulf states. And
a few from the Gulf states.
Yeah.
A few have been from Syria. And really Sunnis, radical Sunnis that are there.
Yeah, and a lot of them have been the Wahhabi Sunnis, which have been Saudis for the most part, or funded by Saudis.
We don't have, just flat out, let's just say it, we don't have, neither we or Europe has a problem with Shiite terrorists.
No.
It's not a problem at all. And of all the Muslims you would let in, in theory, those would be the ones. But because that's where the travel ban ran into Israel's interest, because Israel and Saudi Arabia, and some of the Gulf states are allies, really.
Yeah.
And their big enemy is Iran, and that's why we're sucked into it, because they dominate our government. These powerful interests dominate our government, so their enemies are our enemies.
Yeah.
Even though we really don't have a problem. We live on the other side of the world. North Korea now, Rocket Man is a much greater threat than Iran. Doesn't have that capability.
No.
Doesn't even have nuclear weapons.
No.
I just shake my head. That just goes to show, all the Jewish power.
And Iran has a very stable government. They have regular elections, and things progress there normally. And I wouldn't want to live there, but
of all the Muslim countries, it seems like the most, it has like some degree of democracy, like we do, and they're not.
Some civilization going on. It's a Muslim civilization, so it's not for me or for us, but it seems to work pretty well for them.
So okay, let's say we saved the best for last, and we got two big subjects to get into here. The first is everything that's happened with Charlottesville. You've had the Tim Heaphy release the independent review that was commissioned by the city of Charlottesville after Unite the Right. Today, the governor's state review of Unite the Right came out, and of course, Christopher Cantwell was finally granted bond and is going to be released. So, on all three accounts, it was good news on the Charlottesville front. The independent review conclusively demonstrated that pretty much everything we've been saying on how many podcasts have we done? Everything we have been saying on this podcast for 6 months, all the way up until DeAndre Harris too.
Yeah.
Because DeAndre Harris was mentioned in that report, and they said he started it and attacked with that mag light.
Yeah.
And every other assertion we made, like how the police stood down, how they let it happen, how it was a setup, everything was confirmed by an independent review. Now the state review came out, and it's focused mainly on what do we do how do we have future events in Virginia. That's the main theme of it.
Well, the main fault in the state review is that there was no the lack of coordination between state and local officials.
Lack of coordination, and that came out in both reviews that these two agencies really didn't cooperate.
There was no combined plan.
They couldn't. I watched Tim Heapy's press conference live the other night at the Charlottesville City Council, and he was talking about how the state had come up with this big plan, their plan for Charlottesville. And you know what they did? They went in there and they laid it on a chair. I guess in Charlottesville City Hall or something. They laid the damn thing on a chair.
Now, was this during the meeting? There was a meeting last week or back before Charlottesville?
No, this was back at the time. The state had come in there and they left their operational plan on a chair, and it wasn't found until a few days after the rally.
Oh, sakes.
So the Charlottesville cops had no idea what the state's plan was because they had left the plan on a chair. And all kinds of things came out in that long press conference, and the city council meeting.
Yeah.
He talked about how one of the things I found fascinating is like he talked about how like there was no cops up and down the entrances up and down Market Street and those other streets that egress and going in and out.
Yeah,
how do you entry and exit, right?
Prior to the event and
prior and after the event.
Yeah.
I mean, you would think, to get people in safely and out, there would be cops lined up down the streets to keep both sides separated, right?
Yeah, you would think.
Well, what happened is that all the Virginia State Police cops were all lined up in front of the businesses on the downtown mall where no one was coming from or had any plans to come from. Their job, the Virginia State Police's job, was to protect the park and that downtown mall where no one was had any idea of going down there to vandalize any business on our side.
No.
But the review talks about how the cops deliberately stood behind the barricades. The chief of police said, we're going to let them fight before we can issue
declared
unlawful assembly.
Yeah.
And I was looking on Twitter, and McAuliffe is sitting on his Twitter account that day at like 9 a.m. saying that there's a state of emergency, like an hour or two before there was even violence there.
Yeah, before we even showed up. Yeah.
It's clear. I mean, from these reports and from everything I've seen, that the plan all along was to shut down the rally, declare an unlawful assembly, and the police, they staged that fight. They deliberately, didn't separate the two sides because they knew Antifa would attack, and then they could use that as an excuse to shut the whole thing down.
Yeah, yeah.
And there's no other story. I mean, there's no other plausible. There's no other plausible explanation for what happened.
And now they'd received recommendations from Pikeville, which had already happened prior to that time, and some other city.
It was Portland, Oregon.
Okay, yeah. And the city of Charlottesville just ignored their recommendations as well.
Yeah, completely ignored it. And the way the cops were stationed, like, I've never been to, like, and like, I mean, even if you read the report, I mean, there's all kinds of comments, like, one police officer turns to this guy who has an American flag, and he asks, like, how do I get into this park? And he says, right through there. And you have the so-called clergy and the Antifa working together to block the entrances, and he goes, like, through that. And the cop goes, yeah. And then he turns to this other cop and says, welcome to Charlottesville. Like, that was the plan all along.
Yeah. Basically a big FU. So.
Yeah, it was a big FU, and it's all been exposed. And I mean, even like when they see all, it says in the report, when they see all the Antifa and the clergy and all that lining up in the streets in order to block the Nationalist Front's entrance.
Mm-hmm.
The cops is like, this is going to be a shit show if we don't separate them, but they don't even try to do anything.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that's what they wanted. They wanted a shit show.
That's what they wanted. Yeah.
Yeah.
And even people on our side, they say, like, I think Habak and Parrott too, said, even when we were walking down, that Market Street ready to get in the park, that, they asked cops, I mean, they saw that and they're like, oh, they asked the cops, like, what do we do? And they said, go through that. And that's why we did.
Yeah.
Because the cops had told us to do that.
Yeah.
Because that's what they wanted. And it's just, a massive scandal, and the media has completely ignored it, although it's starting to filter down, all the people who are at the Charlottesville City Council now know, they sat down, they listened to HEFU's review, and they know what happened. And they're furious. There's calls for the chief of police to resign and the city manager to resign.
Well, let's go into the chief of police. From what I understand, the chief of police has been overseeing some investigation as far as making inquiries from his officers who have been interviewed by the investigator, trying to persuade them to make certain statements. He's destroyed some evidence. He's used personal email.
Deleted text messages and everything.
Yeah.
It looks dirty as hell. I mean, Hefe all but just called them out and said that everything we said was completely accurate, and they were dirty as hell, like we said from day one.
Oh yeah. Well, and also some of our guys, I don't think anybody in the National Front, but more from the alt-right guys, and I think specifically Eli Mosley, have been coordinating with the police for about a week prior to August the 12th. And there were very specific plans as far as which routes to come into the park, where we can enter and exit, and this sort of thing, and which streets would be closed, and all of that was just ignored by the Charlottesville police the day of the rally.
And of course, the biggest failure of all that day was they had the school resource officer at that intersection where Fields came through in that car, and she was a school resource officer and just got scared that there were so many people exiting the area and they were fighting.
Yeah. Now,
and she left her post. They said that she could leave her post, and they didn't replace her squad car there. So,
or give her reinforcements.
That's the reason the intersection was open, right?
And now, two things here. First of all, by that time, we were all gone. We were dispersed.
Yeah.
They weren't.
We've been gone for about an hour.
They weren't scared of us. They weren't scared of us. They were scared of Antifa, or she was, the police officer.
It says that in the report that the cops were just scared shitless of especially the two things: the militia and Antifa, who they were scared of.
Yeah. Well, I mean,
not really us.
Antifa had threatened to throw bottles of concrete at the police, and also something else, phenol or something like that. I'm not quite sure what that is. But yeah, I mean, Antifa's threatened to attack the police with those items. So yeah, I mean, they were right to be scared of them, but for some reason they gave Antifa a free hand that day, maybe because they were scared of them and the political fallout. They suffered after the Klan rally a month before that. So. Yeah,
well, the biggest, we're about to get to the last thing, and that's the biggest development of the last week, is all these changes that we've had in the alt-right. Well, first, it came out that Eli Mosley.
Will we talk about Cantwell, or are we going to say that?
Oh, we can talk about Cantwell.
Yeah.
He's getting bonded out. He has to find a residence in Virginia. I know that some of the alt-right guys have set him up on that front.
Yeah, and he can't have guns during while he's out.
Mm-hmm.
He has to wear
electronic monitoring.
Yeah,
and stay in Virginia until the court date. But he's getting out. They just gotta arrange him, to get out of there. So that's good.
Yeah, $25,000 bond, which means he has to come up $2,500. So.
I mean, they're treating. I mean, all over a bullshit pepper spray charge that was already been discredited by perjury under testimony, right?
Yeah.
And see, that's a whole other scandal that wasn't even covered in the reviews. Is all the selective prosecution that's been going on, and these insane fines, and deny of bail for hate speech and all this stuff. I mean, this place acts like it's all the comments made by the city council, like how we are invaders. It's all. I mean, that's a scandal in itself, right there. It hadn't even been investigated.
Yeah, well, they have not charged, at least at this time, they have not charged Gorskinsky and the other person who swore on warrants against Cantwell with perjury, even though two of the charges dropped as being groundless. But they've charged Jason.
They didn't charge him with perjury.
They charged Jason Kessler with perjury for something that happened last spring.
That's the case. That's true.
So, yeah. Anarcho-tyranny.
Anarcho-tyranny. I know that there's a federal grand jury is investigating Antifa too.
Yeah, that's
and they've issued subpoenas to I think at least 3 of them that were in Charlottesville. So there might be a big crackdown coming on them.
Yeah. Then Edward, or some people call that person
Eddie.
Gorskinsky, has been telling people on Twitter not to snitch. So there.
Yeah.
I mean, that's a intention to tell people not to cooperate with law enforcement, the U.S. Attorney's Office.
Last subject. We'll get on to that. The last subject is all these changes in the last week that's happened with the alt-right. We talked about the Kate Steinle thing, and there's been a lot of activism about that.
Yeah, protest.
Identity Europa. First, Identity Europa did the
change leadership. Eli Mosley stepped down.
He changed. Eli's out as head of Identity Europa.
Mm-hmm.
Reinhard Wolf is now the CEO of Identity Europa. The Identity Europa chapter out in the Bay Area left the media's calling it the hate shrine for
Kate.
For Kate. Then in Atlanta, the Atlanta chapter had this huge banner drop the other day near the Georgia Tech campus.
That's beautiful.
And then, of course, in D.C., we had the spontaneous rally by Operation Homeland, which is interesting. This is since Eli left Identity Europa with a bunch of people with him, they've formed this new group called Operation Homeland. And then Matt Heimbach and TWP went up there, and some activists from, I think, Patriot Front, too.
Yeah.
And they held the rally out in front of the White House. It was a public rally. It's something the alt-right hasn't done since Charlottesville.
From what I understand, Mike Enoch of TRS contacted some of those guys and said, we've got to have a demo or a demonstration for Kate Steinle.
That was good to see.
White House. Yeah. And it was originally planned to go Lafayette Park and then march to La Raza office there in D.C., depending on whether or not Antifa showed up. And the announcement for the march was on Twitter by Richard about 20 hours or so, maybe not quite 2 days ahead of time. I didn't even see the announcement until Sunday morning, to tell you the truth.
I saw, that they had been doing these flash rallies, and I saw that, someone here was saying on Twitter, meet Richard and Eli and all these people in front of, the White House on Sunday, and I was like, I don't think I should retweet this because this is probably some kind of information leak. And then they all went and announced it on their Twitter saying, we're having this public thing tomorrow in front of the White House, Antifa, you need to come and be there. And I'm like, this has got to be some kind of ruse because they've been trying to avoid Antifa. But no, they had a straight-up confrontation. It was a public rally, something they haven't done since Charlottesville, and I thought they weren't doing. But anyway,
it was totally peaceful, though.
Totally peaceful, yeah.
Police in D.C. were very professional, and they kept everyone
looked good, no problems.
Yeah.
It was kind of like their Shelbyville in that they needed to do something public to move on and turn the page from Charlottesville.
Yeah, and they also wanted to do it kind of as the new Homeland kind of a debut, I guess.
Well, and I watched. They put out a video about it yesterday, a video announcement about it yesterday. And this is interesting. This is a whole new approach. First of all, they talk in the video about how all these different groups have different strengths and, do some things well, and we're going to all work together now.
That's good. I'm glad to
hear which is good to hear,
Yeah, because for a while they were trying to do some of the optics cucking, and they were talking about not cooperating with some groups. Mostly it was talking about the SNM, the National Socialist Movement.
Yeah.
But usually the hard right trad workers and the League were usually lumped in there as well. But I'm glad to see the TWP was participating in that event. So I mean,
well, what happened? Well, obviously, what happened there is that, and I don't have any, I don't monitor their internal discussions, but Identity Europa apparently, ever since Charlottesville, had been really, adamant about not doing anything with any other groups because of their public brand and being associated with other people. And, there was this argument going on. And then, of course, around the time of Shelbyville, it was focused on us, A lot of these people's like, these people are bad optics, we don't need to do anything with them. And then it reached the point where, the Deadly Stormer crowd and TRS, and they're bad optics too. and Spencer, is kind of like embarrassed us, and we need to move away from that. That was the internal discussion going on. There are people in that group. There are people within IE whose attitude is that, from what I understand it, is that they didn't really want to work with anyone else.
Yeah, well,
they wanted to be identitarians instead of alt-right, which is fine. But anyway, as that got shaken out, it's they went one way. Eli and the Richard crowd, are went the other way and have become more cooperative. So that's where we're at. That was we talked about all these divisions. You had all the stuff going around the time of Shelbyville, Then, of course, you had this internal division within IE, and then that brings us to the last thing, which is this last thing we're going to talk about, which has been raging for the last 3 or 4 days now. Like, okay, it was people who they argued over. First, I believe it was flags, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then it was, do we want to be associated with these groups with bad optics? Then it was like, some people were like, do we want to be associated with any of these people at all? And now the new divide is, we got to get rid of all the women.
Oh.
Or, or some of the women are, trad thoughts and need to be purged. And because a lot of stuff came out with Lauren Southern, and then that was kind of extended, generalized to, encompass all women in the movement. And we're talking about the alt-right here, not us, really. But that's another major source of division.
Yeah.
And
I mean, the League doesn't have, as far as I know, it's never had a problem with women being active.
At all.
And, there's not really anybody showboating in the League as far as trying to stir up controversy that I notice. There's some people who are probably less polished than they could be and occasionally are antagonistic, and I hope people don't do that. We need to work with folks and just stay on good terms. If I agree with somebody 75% of the time, hey, we can work with them. And be friends. It's just something that's come up. Of course, I mean, I guess it's part of it has been kind of from the white Sharia meme that started 7-8 months ago or something like that. Yeah. Although
according to Sacco, he hasn't really used it so much since Seville.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it was kind of.
Yeah, it was going on though.
It was a little bit of a hyperbole involved. Most of it was just simply more like, instead of white Sharia, it's more support for traditional gender roles and morality. That's really what it's about. And I think most people in this movement can support that. Just some people are very adamant about it.
Yeah,
they seem more concerned about it than anything else.
As we call them, the MGTOW crowd, going their own way, or a lot of those guys.
I'm not married myself.
Yeah,
but I'm not anti-woman or anything like that.
I know. I mean, from my perspective, within the League, within a lot of the other groups that we work with, it's not really an issue I hear much about.
No.
A lot of people are married. A lot of people have kids. I remember we quit doing the activism because so many people got married and started having kids, and there was just an explosion of marriages and kids. I remember going to wedding showers, weddings, celebrating, births of kids and stuff, liking on Facebook, and that's how it's been with us. And then you get on some of the other the other side of the alt-right, not kind of our side of it. You just see this rage against women in general, and I've seen a lot of art. Go ahead.
If I had to make a distinction, I would say that the sides that are more traditional don't have the problem, while the sides that are generally more open to modernist thinking, whether it's agnosticism or atheism, and Naxox tend to be a little bit more. I'm not going to say. I'm saying more inclined to be anti-woman as far as being participants, much less leaders in the movement.
It just seems to be an issue that really, I just can't help but notice contrast to how it's this issue that constantly roils. It was like that for years with white nationalism.
Yeah.
It was big, but it's far worse now with the alt-right, in my opinion, than it ever was with white nationalism in terms of some of the rhetoric I see.
Yeah. Well, I think there's
it seems to me like, this is the latest new divide that people are harping on, and not really helping matters.
Well, I think there's a reason for it. There are 3 or 4. Most of them are YouTubers. And I'm not going to name names, but
there's only like 3. There's only like there's Lauren Southern, and there's maybe like 2 or 3 others.
Terry McCarthy, Brittany Pettibone, and there's a few more minor ones like Blonde and the Belly of the Beast, and that's like occasionally I'll watch their videos, but for the most part, unless they're interviewing somebody I'm particularly interested in hearing, they generally don't have much in the way of original or new or thought-provoking content. But the problem is that they do get a lot of donations. And that kind of drives up the funds for other purposes, and I think that's where some of the resentment comes from. I know some of that. It's been mentioned in some of the Daily Storm or some, and I can understand that. But hey, men, they're attracted to women. That's just how things are, and that's how I like it. That's how it's supposed to be. Whether or not that's the best thing for the movement or not, I don't know. We need women in the movement. First thing, to attract men and to attract other women and to normalize it. I think that's got to be one of our bragging points. In that we seem to, I think, have the best solution to this. In that a lot of us, like I said, it seems like women will come in the movement, and a woman will meet a man and get married and have kids. And I wish there were more women who were coming in, and there were more marriages and more kids being born. And that's great. That's how you resolve the issue. Is like men and women are not equal. I was going to write something about this. They're not equal. They're different, but they're complementary. Yeah.
And when you just have like a bunch of sexually frustrated young men who are isolated and not really interacting with anyone in the real world, and it's just this online environment, it's not healthy. And that kind of stuff, obviously turns off women who aren't, attracted by some of those personality types that accumulate.
Yeah. Well, as far as I don't want to give people the wrong idea, pretty much nearly all of the leadership in the league, particularly at the national level, are men. And it's the same in North Carolina as far as the leadership, pretty much being all men, particularly since one of our couples moved to South Carolina. As far as I know, there's only one National League officer who's a woman. And
and I think she's like a medic or something.
She is.
A nurse. No big deal.
Yeah.
But, it's not a case of, women, with us, it's not a case of women being leaders. Women are included, and they do stuff like great. Like when we were in Shelbyville and in New Orleans, my wife made sandwiches for everybody and stayed away from the front lines, and women get to socialize with other women. They like that. And they want to have friends too. It's no big.
And since we have to admit that these events have the potential for violence, probably best not to have women there, to tell you the truth, unless we can be really sure that there's not going to be any violence. There were a lot of
I've
women.
Noticed.
There were a lot of women in Charlottesville, and they probably should not have been there.
That's definitely the case. After Charlottesville, my sense is that there's definitely going to be less violence. We're going to, even in like Tim Heafy's presentation, when he was talking about what Charlottesville needs to do in the future, he was talking about the stadium plan. And the stadium plan is basically what we dealt with in Murfreesboro and Shelbyville. We didn't go to Murfreesboro, but it was a similar setup with, checkpoints and streets, kind of cops kind of encircling an area where you have to walk around a huge area to get to the other side.
Separate parking.
Designated parking, entry points, barriers. So next year, I think what we saw in Shelbyville is going to be the norm.
Yeah.
At a lot of these places.
Well, we hope so. It's
going to be like, the police presence is going to be so heavy, nothing will get out of hand.
Well,
and that's a good thing and a bad thing.
Well, I think a part of this is going to be what the fallout from Charlottesville is going to end up, whether or not the city is going to be successfully sued, such as whether or not whether or not the chief of police is fired, and whether there's any even political fallout at the governor's level to McAuliffe.
Well, they had the governor's election in Northam as the new governor.
Yeah.
Right?
Well, I mean, he could still be prosecuted or sued. Afterwards, or suffer, have to be raked over the coals by the U.S. attorney or something like that. And like we talked about, the U.S. attorney is investigating some of the Antifa. Now, so far as I know, they're not investigating any of us, which kind of tells you something, unless they're just holding us doing it one.
I mean, if they are, I haven't heard anything. The only thing I've heard is that some people were interviewed, but that's because they were considered victims of Antifa attacks.
Well, I haven't been contacted yet, so I haven't been contacted by the U.S. attorney yet. So.
Oh, okay. Well, that's good. All right. Well, that about sums it up.
I'm kind of surprised. Did you want to just let folks know where to find you?
Yeah, it's at OCC Dissent on Twitter and Gab. Probably not going to be on Twitter much longer. I'll get purged. You find me on Gab.
Yep.
And at OccidentalDissent.com.
Yep. And likewise with me on Twitter and Gab, it's just Harold Cruz at both places. And likewise, I don't have nearly as many followers as you do, so I might last a little bit longer than December the 18th, but which will be a little bit embarrassing for me. But if I'm...
they'll probably get you at some point.
Yeah, they probably will. Last year you were one of I think within the top 120 Nazi with quotation mark accounts on Twitter or something like that?
Yeah, I'm sure I'm a much higher number now that so many other people's got banned and I've managed to survive somehow. So I assume I'm going to be one of the first to go.
Probably so.
December 18th.
All right. Well, if there's nothing else, I want to wish everyone a good night. And this has been episode 61 of the Southern National Radio. And we did manage to get in under an hour. All right.
Oh,
good night.